you everyone for being here. So excited to have Toby and Ryan with us today to talk about their journeys from elite sport to the world of coaching and business. Some great topics, I think, that we can dive into today. So I'm very excited. I hope everyone else is excited as well. Feel free to put, if at any point, if you've got questions that you'd like to ask Ryan and Toby, feel free to put that into the chat or in the Q&A. And we'll cover those as we go through the topics. Just sharing my screen here for anyone who's joining, but I'll just stop sharing that now so you can, we can all just look at each other. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Toby and Ryan, once again. I'll do a quick intro to Madhu and then to both of you, and then I'll pass on to both of you to introduce yourself a bit more deeply and touch on any projects that are your priority or your focus at the moment. For those of you who might be new to us, Alad and I are the founders of Madhu. We are a coaching technology startup building software for coaches and their clients to come together and build up that coaching journey together. Many of you might have seen the software already or tried it out, so thank you for that. Apart from the software, we love to create value for the coaching community in other ways as well. And part of that is this community event where we bring together people to talk about coaching, various topics that are interesting to people in the broader space of coaching and personal development. So thank you for joining us. With that, I'll introduce Toby and Ryan, two very, very special guests, especially special for me because I'm terrible at sport. And so whenever I've watched any kind of sport, be it Olympics or cricket, which obviously Toby and Ryan have been a part of, I always feel so much in awe at the skill that people show in sport. So I'm really excited to chat with both of you today. By way of intro, both of you have quite a lot in common, actually. You are both entrepreneurs, you are both coaches, proud fathers, in addition to your achievements in sport. Toby, of course, representing Australia in water polo at the Olympics in Athens, and Ryan, pro cricketer, played in the Big Bash League, and also first-class domestic cricket in Australia. I'm probably missing quite a bit here, so I'll pass on to you, Toby, to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about anything that is your current focus, and then Ryan, same as well, to introduce yourself and then talk about your current focus.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having us, and thanks, Alad, thanks for having us as well. It's really cool and always great to have the opportunity to talk about all these sorts of topics that I feel so passionately about. So thank you, and cool to get to hear a bit more of Ryan's story too tonight with any luck. So thanks everyone for joining us. Look, I mean, it's a pretty good synopsis of my career, I guess, Paul. And I started off, always been really interested in performance, and I guess as an athlete, you're trying to be the best you can be, and of course contribute to the team. For me anyway, a lot of it was about how good could I be in that stage of my journey, and then make those contributions that I needed to make to a team as a centre forward. And actually, we have my vice captain in Athens is on this call too, Thomas Whalen. He was my vice captain in Athens for the Olympics, and he played a couple of Olympics himself. So pretty cool to have him here. So thanks, Tommy. And then post-Olympics, I'd always been interested in business, and I'd studied throughout. My parents had actually insisted that I study. Water polo was never really going to be a career path. For those who may or may not be aware, but in Australia it's a pretty amateur sport. There are professional leagues overseas, and I played a bit in them as well, which is an awesome experience. But back here it was always going to be, there needed to be something next. So I kind of leapt straight into that post and still played another couple of World Championships. So played the World Championships in 2005. But my entrepreneurial journey really filled what I thought was an unfillable void in terms of my passion for water polo and the athletic pursuit. I loved business and trying to grow a business and the sort of learning curve there. And so did that with a digital marketing business initially. It's actually still running with my business partner. And so he runs it 18 years later, which is pretty incredible. And so, posts, and then I guess for me, I hit a bit of one of those moments, right, which seems to happen, I think, for a lot of coaches too, where you sort of get forced to reflect internally in terms of what's going on. And for me, that was the sort of death of my father. My father-in-law was in hospital with leukemia at the same time. I had my second daughter with silent reflux and wasn't sleeping. And, this convergence of factors sort of makes a perfect storm. And all that's left is really you go looking for all these answers outside, and ultimately, the only answer that's worth it is in the mirror. And so, around that time, I was introduced to the framework that I love to coach to now, called ACT, Acceptance Commitment Training as a coach, or therapy if you're a psychologist, which I'm not. And that's all around values and purpose and all that kind of great stuff that coaches get into. And really, I guess I ran down the rabbit hole of that and realised that this was something that I really wanted to pursue. And so in my own business, I think initially with that digital marketing part of it anyway, I was like really interested in how good could this team be. And then I realised, there was maybe a contribution here as a coach to, how good could I help other individuals, other teams, and really make that contribution in a broader circle. So that kind of brings me to here, having had a crack at a tech startup as well, Paul and Allard. Congrats on having a crack there. We tried to build a tech product and took us, 3 years later, decided that wasn't going to work. So I've been out on my own as a coach now for a year or just over 18 months, and loving it actually. It's been a great journey. So, and it was great to connect with you two down in Sydney. So pretty much brings us to the present. Oh, sorry, focus for me. Sorry, final part of my question was something that I've been talking a little bit about, as you alluded to earlier, Paul, on LinkedIn lately, which is all around this idea of reinvention. And I actually think it ties really neatly into the athlete transition. But what I've recognised in a lot of my clients is that there are, and having started and actually resigned from 2 businesses myself, they're really tough times to leave what has become an identity and try to reboot and reinvent. And I've noticed it is a pattern amongst my clients that I've loved working with as well. Whether that's an SAS soldier leaving the SAS after 13 years of having a bag packed, or a partner in a professional services firm who has 43 years in a single firm and trying to figure out what comes next, to business owners, trying to take themselves up to the next level. It's sort of that combination of perfect storm of pain that then leads to there must be some change here, and it's too important not to make the change. And so that's been the project and the process and how I help people through that's been really that's the project that has all of my attention at the moment. Over to you, Ron.
Thanks, Toby. That's fascinating. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Thanks, Paul and Alan, for hosting, and great stuff with MeDo. It's an awesome community we're building. Well, you're building and I'm a part of. So thank you. So as for me, I'm a dad of 3. I live in Melbourne with my wife and 3 kids who are 10, 4, and 2. And I'm a leadership coach and facilitator, and I'm also the founder of DadFit, which I'll get back to in a minute. In terms of a bit about my background, I was a professional cricket player for 8 years, played in the 2 main national competitions in Australia, the Sheffield Shield and the Big Bash League, across that period, mostly in Victoria and New South Wales. And I was also fortunate to play a bunch of cricket overseas in South Africa, India, Nepal, and England. So I had a great time with cricket, but towards the end of my career, I realized that I was becoming more excited about other things that I was doing off the field than I was about actually playing anymore. So I decided to take quite an early leap to retire from professional cricket at 26 and go on to new adventures. Whereas most cricketers will sort of want to play on into their 30s, and as long as you can keep getting paid for it, it's a pretty good gig, is the approach most people take. But I was ready to do some other things. So since then, I've had a few adventures. I did my master's overseas in public policy. So lived in America for 2 years, I've had a couple of different consulting jobs, one at McKinsey, one at Dandelo Partners doing strategy consulting, and also some leadership coaching in a consulting sense. And I've also done policy and advocacy work at Centre for Policy Development. But something that I've done for a few years on the side is being a coach. And as time's gone on, I've realized that every time I'm coaching clients, I feel like a happy and good version of myself, and it has lasting effects throughout the day. And I wanted more of that in my life and to be able to play that supporting role for more people. So that was one of the reasons I chose to leave my job at McKinsey last year and go out on my own with a coaching business and also start this social enterprise called DadFit. And as for DadFit, it's the mission is to make dadding a team sport again. So many dads with young kids, there are probably a few on this call, feel isolated, and you can feel like, I certainly felt like I was working it out on my own as a young dad. I became a dad in my 20s, which is a bit unusual these days. And it's generally quite overwhelming juggling career and family responsibilities, let alone thinking about your own health and fitness. So DadFit is there to create opportunities for dads to get together, do group workouts, and then sit around a table and talk about dad life in a way that's sometimes fun and lighthearted and sometimes quite serious and deep. Because, you know, male culture doesn't really allow those spaces to happen very organically, sadly, very often. And I, was in a decade worth of sporting change rooms, and it's amazing how sometimes you can be in a room of 15 guys for 8 hours and not really talk about anything substantial at all. So I'm trying to flip that conversation on its head and use sport as a way to create those real conversations and connections that dads really crave. So that's what's really exciting for me right now, in answer to your question, Paulwyn, both that and the coaching. So currently we've got a couple of groups running in local neighbourhoods around Melbourne where I live, and we're in the process of expanding to workplaces and sporting organisations. And the individuals I coach, some of them are linked to DadFit, who are either dads and business leaders or one of the other, and some of them are linked to my sporting career in the sense that they're athletes transitioning onto the next phase of their life. And some of them are more generally men and women who are at interesting points of their careers or lives. A bit like you, Toby, often they're facing a major transition. It could be a big change at work or a big change in their home life.
Thanks so much, Toby and Ryan. That's such a great intro to both of you, and so much to unpack there, in particular about those transition moments which we all face in our lives so often, and the role that coaching can play there. Perhaps to kind of start off with your sporting careers, I guess, because the topic that we decided on was that journey from your sporting careers to your current work and life. So could you talk, obviously, apart from Thomas, great to have two Olympians here, by the way, apart from you or anyone else here who is an elite, who has been an elite sports person, we don't generally get a sense of the kind of pressures that people face at those levels of sport. Often we are the audience and we like to watch and, commentate on how their people are performing, but we don't get a true sense for what are the kinds of pressures you face when you are playing at that level. So could you talk us through that, and perhaps also touch on how coaching was impactful in being able to deal with those pressures or navigate those pressures? Maybe starting off with Ryan again and then over to Toby.
Yeah, so I think compared to a regular job, being a professional athlete, there are a lot of ups and downs. You can be playing in front of a stadium with 50,000 people one night and perform like a career highlight and feel like on top of the world. And then 2 weeks later, you could have scored 2 ducks in a row and you're dropped from the team. And you feel terrible, or you get injured and you're no longer able to participate. So I think you do learn to cope with really significant ups and downs, probably more so than your average job. And coaching is really important in supporting you through those, I think. When I think of a couple of moments of coaching that really helped me, the common theme was, I think, on the one hand, helping me believe in myself and trust my abilities through those ups and downs. And the second one was unlocking a new level of freedom in the way I played and performed that I didn't even know was inside of me. I remember this moment, I was batting on the bowling machine with a coach when I was, I think, 18 years old. And he was a new coach for me who'd come from England. And he commented that I looked sort of overcoached, like I was too focused on my technique and doing the right thing with my body. So he said, let's just do the complete opposite. And I'm going to put the ball in the machine. And at the moment it comes out, I'm going to tell you a particular direction you have to hit it in, like over extra cover or over mid wicket. And you'll just have a split second to just hit it there. And I was amazed at what I was able to do when I let go of any worry about what my technique was like and just played with freedom. And I tried to remember that for the rest of my career, in that, you practice for a long time so that you can be particularly expert in a particular field. But ultimately what unlocks, I think, the best level of performance is allowing yourself the freedom to just let the magic happen, getting out of your own way.
Toby, over to you. What do you think of Ryan's thoughts, as well as what's your experience been like?
Yeah, no, it's super cool to hear that, Ryan, actually. And I would say, the team sport aspect of water polo, when you're in the water and so much is, you're making all the decisions as you go. But the willingness for a coach to, there's one coach in particular who I would rank as perhaps one of my best coaches, even though I only probably did a season or something with him. But one of the things he did was he just brought it back to first principles all the time. So for him, it was, and perhaps more at a team level, but it was like, we had essentially the values work, right? Like patience, focus, intensity, and then do it. And really speaks a lot to that sort of willingness to, like, it's yours, you own it, go do it. As long as you're trying to bring yourself on or someone else on the score, or you're trying to limit the opportunities for the opposition to score, then, these are the four guiding things. And he just, you could just see that repetition of just first principles all the time, at every single training session and every single game. And, that was the one season where a team who was probably had underperformed really for the last 3 years, we ended up winning the league in Australia. And that was just a really interesting moment for me from a coaching experience, and in stark contrast to some of the other stuff that I'd been coached through. The other thing for me, I guess, when I think of the great coaches I've had, was probably the difference between Australia and Spain. So Australia is really very much volume based, whereas when you got to Spain, it was much more around intensity. And I recognise, I think, when I look back at a moment or a period like that, where really structured, really intense, but not like hours and hours and hours and hours, was just like how valuable focus is to just do the work as well as you possibly can and then recover appropriately. Whereas if I compare it to what I'd been doing before I left, I was doing like 6 hours a day, weights, gym, whatever. You get to Spain and all of a sudden, and I know Tommy can talk to this too, but it was very much, much shorter sessions, much sharper, more game time, and much more recovery, like ultimately much more recovery time. And it's something that I end up talking to a lot of my coaching clients about, is intentional recovery when they're working and operating at really high levels, is how are you as intentional around your recovery as you are with the actions that you're taking? Because ultimately managing your own energy is just so critical to, an outcome or just, and even if it's not the outcome, but just being who you want to be through the process as well, I think. Numbers of lessons, really. Great. And some really good lessons from the people who weren't so good coaches that I've absolutely wholly not adopted.
That sounds like an interesting one to dig into. What should you not adopt? Do you perhaps have any examples for us on what you shouldn't adopt?
Yeah, look, I mean, how to frame it. I think it was probably that top-down hierarchy and the lack of, like, almost the absence of what Ryan was talking about, the freedom to do it in your style, which is, there is no single way, right? There's no single way to get from A to B. And in fact, it's super important that people own their own style and work within their own context of, in a sporting endeavour, it's your physical limitations and your strengths and your weaknesses and how you adopt and adapt those into the situation, the opponent you're facing, and all those sorts of things. But if there's an assumption that it's only one way and this is the way, it doesn't matter how credible that source is. It just completely undermines the individual's capacity to make decisions and ultimately sort of be who they want to be and be the player that they need to be to deliver in the performance moments. And so, you end up with someone who's too tight, overcoached, to your point, Ryan, which I think is a really good one, or just too rigid and trying to be someone else as opposed to being themselves. And if you can unlock that piece, then that's where the upside lies, in my opinion.
I think I'd add on the what not to do in coaching.
Yep.
I think in professional sport, it's all professional, so the coaches have their livelihood is on the line as well with the team's performance. And I think that the not so good coaches I had, it felt like they would transfer their own anxiety onto the team. Like, you better go out there and perform because I'm stressed about my job if we don't win this game. And not that they would say it in those words, but that was the kind of energy. And that's a really negative energy to have. It kind of psychologically does the opposite of the kind of freedom mindset I was sharing earlier. One of the things I love about the coaching that I do now and the coaches I've worked with outside of sport is this idea that your coach is 100% in your corner, which isn't always the case in sport because often the coach is also a selector. So they sometimes are with you and sometimes they're getting ready to cut you from the team.
Oh yes, that's a very interesting dynamic. And in everything that you've said so far, there's so many parallels to working life, like just life in general. The point around volume versus intensity, the kind of hustle culture that we get used to makes us think that we should be working or hustling all the time, but that's not really productive because you burn yourself out. So thinking about focus and intensity is a great way to balance that out and to balance the things that you focus on and still get things done and be productive. Would love to go into that as well in a little bit, but I think we've got a couple of questions from Alexis and Ruben, so maybe we'll dive into that first and then come back to unpack some of the things we've touched on. So Alexis is asking, how did coaching help you separate yourself from the expectations of others? So the expectations that other people place on you as a professional athlete. So was coaching helpful there, and how was it helpful? Would love to hear some stories as well, if there are stories that you can recall related to this question.
You want to take that one, Ron? I can. I don't.
You can. Yeah, you can jump in. Feel free.
Sure. So, I mean, a part of me wants to say that our coaches really didn't address this kind of stuff with any level of the maturity of the coach, like the coaching as a conversation or as a skill set or as a. I feel like it has come in an enormous way since 2004. Like in 20 years, the idea of a coach, what a coach actually does versus just being a subject matter expert, and in this instance, water polo and sport, they were outsourcing any kind of pressure management to a psychologist who you saw maybe once a quarter if you were lucky, and that was about it. And so there was certainly some care of expectations of others. The thing that I found most useful, expectations, because I always felt like my expectations of me were as high as anyone. Like my own expectations are probably my worst offender in a lot of ways, rather than other people. Other people generally were pretty supportive, and so is more dealing with my own inner critic and all that kind of stuff that I found more challenging through my career. But the one book that I found really useful, actually, that I didn't even realise was until was even an idea was this one from Michael Johnson, who ran the 200 and 400 meters in one gold in Atlanta Olympics. And he said, one of the big things for him at the time, and this was just before, we were going into the Olympic selection. I remember reading the book, and he said, one of the things was to actually own the expectation that you want to be an Olympian. In my instance, or for him, was to win these 2 gold medals. And I remember thinking, oh wow! And I actually started talking to people about, owning. Yes, I do want to go to the Olympics. Yes, we do have 3 months before selection, as opposed to, oh no, it'll be fine. I'm still waiting to hear, avoidance of the. So actually ownership of my own expectations, which were, the only, in some respects, the only ones that mattered. But that was my take on that. Just the ownership of your own.
Yeah, ownership of your own expectations and being okay with, this is what I want to do. Oh, that's super interesting, because my mind immediately goes to this Australian idea of the tall poppy syndrome and whether you face it. Was that a factor in being hesitant to accept the fact that this is what I want to do and this is what I want to achieve?
I'm sure it was a part of it. Yeah. Yep. And just fear of failing to that expectation as well, frankly, at the time.
A couple of quick points to add. One that I got from a coach at a relatively young age, which I was grateful for, was to focus on the process, not the outcome. It's really helpful in sport and I think in life. So what that meant in the sporting context was, if you knew that you prepared well for the match and you stuck to your game plan and you were in a good state of mind, and then something happened, like you got a bad umpiring decision and you were out, then not to dwell too much on that, even though that's the thing that, they would talk about on the TV commentary, or the newspaper would write about the thing that went wrong. And that was a way of sort of separating yourself from the outcome or other people's perception of your performance. Easier said than done, but when I was able to do it, it was really helpful. And the other one that worked for me was having a sense of purpose outside of sport in life. And more so than that, actually, in the later years of my career, I felt that my performance in sport had a purpose beyond the sport. And so I founded this nonprofit called Batting for Change. And the idea was to use cricket, the popularity of cricket in Australia, to raise money for education projects in developing cricket countries like India and Nepal, where I played, for example. And then I had this sense of like, there's something bigger at stake here than the game of cricket. I'm going out there to perform, and I know that if I succeed, it will be helpful for this bigger cause. And then I also did some coaching and mentoring with younger players in the later years of my career. And that was another good example of finding a deeper meaning apart from whether you win or lose, which actually helped me perform better.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Toby. That the idea of process and being in love with the process rather than just focusing on the outcomes also resonates super strongly. So many parallels to startup life there as well, as you know very well, which actually neatly brings us to the next kind of big topic. And Ruben's question fits into that very well, which is the transition from sport into being an entrepreneur, being a coach, business life. So would love to hear a little bit about what was that transition like and how you navigated it. And then perhaps touching on Ruben's question of, do you think you have assumed authority in your coaching business as a result of your elite sporting background? And what advice would you have for coaches looking to establish that niche for themselves and establish authority in a niche for themselves? And perhaps in addition, my question is that what advice would you have for people navigating a transition or navigating a transition into a coaching role more specifically? Ryan, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Oh, my 2-year-old just walked into the room, by the way. Hey, Sonny.
Hello.
That's why I was momentarily distracted. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, so the transition into business, I think it's a funny one. Like, in some ways, people like overestimate your abilities when you first transition, and in some ways they underestimate them. They don't really know how to peg you, is what I found. And it takes a while to work out how your strengths that you learned in your sporting career actually apply to the business world or to whatever you're doing next. I think what Toby said about self-management has rings true for me. I think in sport, like I remember when I was thinking about changing careers, one of the first things I did was I did an internship at an ed tech company in Silicon Valley during one of my off seasons. And I was really impressed by the people over there. But one thing I noticed is they were all exhausted all the time. And it struck me like this doesn't feel like a high performance environment. It feels like people are being treated like machines, not creative human beings with interesting ideas. And that's an insight that stuck with me. So I was already starting to see, while I don't have the specific skills, there are some transferable things that I can bring from sports and perspectives. As for the point about, and I think the idea of trying and failing is another one, like you just touched on, Paul, one that's very transferable, particularly in startup land. In sport, you have bad days at least as often as good days. And some people aren't, it takes a while to become psychologically used to that for all of us. And sport is like a bit of a crash course in getting used to that quickly because it happens all the time. But to directly answer the question from Ruben, I do think you get some authority when it feels relevant, your sporting background, to the kind of coaching you're trying to do. I read this good piece a while ago about coaching. I can't remember the source, but essentially it was saying what's powerful about coaching is combining it, like it is a sort of general skill, but combining it with a specific area of life experience or expertise is a really powerful combination. And I think maybe, I'm certainly not an expert in building coaching businesses, but what's worked for me so far is that sort of lens. So on the one hand, combining the fact that I was an athlete with being a coach brings certain skills and value propositions, but also for me, combining that with the major transition I undertook in my life has proved to be a point of value for clients, because they can see, oh, you transitioned from being an athlete into business consulting, and now you're running your own stuff. These are some interesting transitions, and they sort of, I think, are interested in me because of those life changes that I've made as well. And then similarly with the sort of strategy consulting work I did when I was working in management consulting, that's something I can draw on and gain some credibility when it comes to advising clients. But I certainly don't promise to be able to do everything. I try to stick mostly to things that feel within my realm of lived experience.
Yeah, hey Ryan, it's really neat actually, because I was just talking about this with two coaches in the last fortnight or so, and the way I described it to them was, what is your origin story? And I think, Ruben, I agree. I do think there is some assumed authority in having an elite sporting background, and even just on the, perhaps in part because you've been on the receiving end of an enormous amount of coaching by the time you get to the end of a career, which shows you the good and bad of what a great coach can do and what a terrible coach can do as well, and the costs to be paid for both of those. But yeah, the idea of writing out your origin story is a really interesting one I found, and one I found useful for me and for other coaches that I've worked with and had conversations with around, what is it about you, ends up being looking in the mirror a bit, but what is the pain of your own that you'd really like to, help support others through in a lot of ways, is what it boils down to. What have you learned, hard won, and as well as, from a lived experience standpoint, and then how do you combine that with, some of the evidence-based practices? Because ultimately, I think one of the things with coaching is that, the relevance and relatability is so important in the lived experience of the chemistry of the coach and the client is just critical, right? So if there's not the relatability there, then it's going to be really hard to have the impact, because I'm a big believer that the messenger matters as much as the message, So it's one of the funny things I think with coaching is that, the person does really matter, and therefore the origin story of that person, being able to, I guess, draw through the threads of what your most passionate about, and your own pain points as well, not just your happy times, right? Not just the performance points, but the pain points that you feel you'd like to support others through, I think is a way of getting into, in a way, you are your own niche is another way of framing that. So, so what is your story and how do you bring that to life? And you become your own target audience, plus or minus 10 years. And then what do you care about and how do you stay in that kind of vein? Because people naturally sort of gravitate to that energy and want to engage. So that's one way of, your niche is you, is a way of thinking about it. I hope that's useful, Ruben.
That was super. That was awesome, Toby and Ryan. Great. Really great thoughts there. We have one more question from Veena, which is, what is one skill or character trait that you learned or acquired as an athlete that got in the way of being a professional coach? I think that's a great question. What was something you had to unlearn, perhaps, to rephrase it in a different way?
That's a great question, Veena, or great coaching question. It's hard for me to think of something that got in the way specifically of being a professional coach, but there are certainly a bunch of things that got in the way of being, the best human I could be. I think that, and hence, I guess, contributes to the kind of coach you are. I think in my sort of teen years and for at least the first half of my 20s, I was quite achievement focused, and being a professional sports person probably played into that, right? Because you're constantly evaluated based on the numbers next to your name in any given week or season. And in more recent years, and particularly becoming a dad, a huge part of that journey for me is making my life more fundamentally relationship focused. So it's all about the people I love, the people who love me, how I'm connected with them, and then building outwards from there is very much how I see my life these days. And that's been a really important growth journey for me, and has probably unlocked the part of me that really loves to be a coach and wants to be a coach. It's led me in that direction in my life, if you know what I mean. And when I'm in a good version of myself, I think it brings out the kind of coach I want to be.
Toby, would you agree, or was that experience similar for you? Yeah.
Yes, it's a cracking question. To be totally honest with you, I'm struggling with it a bit, but I think the character trait that, I don't know whether I learned or acquired it as an athlete, but is actually probably a story older than being an athlete for me anyway, is imposter syndrome. So I always felt like I was the last one selected on any team that I was ever selected in. I always felt like I was on the risk of not making teams. And, that drove me to work super hard, to be the athlete I wanted to be and, drive business and all that kind of stuff. But actually, a willingness to sit with that. I don't know that I've unlearned it, Paul. I don't think it's ever going away, but it is. It's something I guess I've become more aware of and recognise both its value and its downside in imposter, and that led to definitely got in the way of learning, reading all the books but not doing. When it came to switching over to coaching, trying to become a coach, I guess. Sooner or later you got to do coaching. You can't just learn about it, and so. But it's an age. It's one of my age-old stories that I work with every day. So I'm certainly more aware of it now than I was as an athlete. But it's definitely been there all along.
Yeah, I wonder if that is something that people, like clients, come to you with as well, and because of your lived experience, you can support them through that. I feel you. It's it's so crazy to me. Just for me, it's mind blowing to hear someone who has been to the Olympics, been part of Australia's team there, say that they have imposter syndrome. I think that just like blows my mind. And thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that, and the honesty and vulnerability in sharing that with us. Yeah, I think a lot of people agree. Maybe perhaps coming into your personal lives a little bit as well, and the role that coaching or the coaching you've received, or your role as a coach as well plays into that. I know that you've both mentioned it. You're very proud dads to your children. Family is very important to you. So what aspects of coaching do you think are applicable to family life? And are there any coaching skills or sports skills that you would wish to transfer or see your children pick up as well? Perhaps starting with Toby.
Yeah, look, I mean, so much is applicable, I think, as a parent, and practicing coaching skills on my children and poor wife. The poor buggers have copped every single experiment I've ever tried. Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, look, it was. I would say, like, the one thing that I guess I talk a lot about and feel really passionately about is this ability to sit with emotion as opposed to making it go away. And so this is the evidence base of ACT, and I have found it enormously powerful for me personally. The whole the techniques of like labeling emotion and creating space. And I mean, ACT to me is a evidence framework, I guess, that brings together a whole bunch of ancient practices, really. Mindfulness, acceptance, all the goal setting fits in with it, purpose, but it really, and mindfulness and that ability to reconnect to the present is something that kids just insist on and are brutal with, is that if you are not present, they will just make you present. So in a lot of ways, I feel like they're coaching me all the time. I try to coach, but boy, they are definitely developing my character. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one, but that whole idea of unlocking intrinsic motivation and asking questions rather than giving orders, and I inevitably fail at that all the time. But it's sort of too important not to stand back up and keep trying, right? So that's the thing for me. Ryan, your take?
Yeah. I think like a daily challenge for me as a dad is to be present with the kids in their worlds. On the show Bluey, the dad bandit healer, he's got this amazing ability to do that, which is why I think dads across Australia love Bandit, and mums and kids. But it's really hard when you're kind of in the adult world with your adult thoughts to then switch into the child's world at their level. But that's really a coaching skill, right? It's like this level 2 listening. It's like really being in the other person's frame of reference instead of being in yours in a conversation. And I honestly more often don't get that right than do get that right with the kids. But it's something that's really important to me because I think, in the longer term of our lives, it's those moments of presence with our kids and really being beside them in their worlds that will make a lasting difference and we'll both remember. I think there's another thing which is sort of, there's this coaching. I was trained by the Coactive Coaching Training Institute. I'm not sure if other schools have this similar model, but one of the sort of concepts there is the client's little agenda and their big agenda. Like the little agenda is on any given day or week, what are they concerned about and wanting to overcome? And the big agenda is something the coach helps them hold, which is what's the bigger growth story here. And parenting to me is also constantly that sort of dynamic where you need to really be present in the kids' little agenda, but also part of your job is to hold their big agenda for them and see the things they're not able to see and try and provide some bigger picture steering. Again, certainly not a master, but I've really loved, since starting DadFit in the last 6 months, it's just been amazing for me to connect with other dads and and hear their stories of how they tackle these kinds of day-to-day nitty-gritty parenting things. I really think a lot of the answer is in building community and learning from each other.
Yeah, great, great experiences there from both Toby and Ryan, and great advice. I have two last questions before we have a final few minutes for people to throw any other questions they have at you, and for both Ryan and Toby to share where people can find you after this.
Can you discuss your experience of being present in and potentially getting comfortable sitting in the uncomfortable, and how that has supported you in your transition?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few examples of this, Thomas. I'm not sure which transition you're referring to. There have been a few, but I think, yeah, I noticed there's probably a pattern with me of like diving really headfirst into things, particularly after I'd made a transition. And then only a couple of years later, like working through the full emotional and identity repercussions of that change. So I think what I'm hopefully getting better at is creating space in my life to really sit with the meaning of the transitions closer to the time that they're happening. And this is something I try to work on with my clients as well, for whom this is a priority, so that you can sort of gain the insight instead of 2 or 3 years down the track. How can you create the conditions to have a clear channel to your emotions and your wisdom, so you can kind of gain that meta insight on yourself now and act on it? So one example for me would be becoming a dad. This is when I think I didn't get it right initially. I was like really excited about my own career at that point, and in hindsight didn't take enough time off and didn't really take enough emotional energy for the huge investment of raising a newborn. And it led to a point where I was feeling out of sync with my wife, and I think we were both unhappy in different ways. And it really took a period of a couple of months off to reset and reconnect and realize what was important to me, which was that at that time, like, our baby was the most important thing in the world, and I needed to make the other things second for a while.
It's awesome, Ryan.
Thanks for jumping in there, Thomas, Ryan. We're having some internet issues here, but hopefully that's resolved now. Toby, were you going to share something there as well?
Well, I think what I've come to learn is this sort of analogy of the brick wall and the trampoline, right? Like, it's really easy to build the brick wall of this is who I am and this is how I act and this is what happens. But the opportunity I see, particularly in transition and as you're shifting from, shifting from wherever you are to wherever you want to be, or like sometimes having literally no idea of what next is, then the opportunity is to be rather than the brick wall that gets hit by the sledgehammer and cracks, is try to build the trampoline. So then you allow yourself the ability to absorb and then come back and absorb and come back, and recognize that actually you're literally practicing that every day anyway in so many micro ways. And then this is another opportunity to operate like that into the uncertainty of what the transition is. And so what are you coming back to? How do you quickly reflect on, who matters, to Ryan's point before, who matters, what are my values, where might I be headed? And recognizing that this is the price, really the discomfort is the price of entry to the change. Doesn't make it any less uncomfortable, but it, so I actually think the idea of getting comfortable in the uncomfortable is not a truism, if that makes sense. It's uncomfortable and that's okay. And so to keep coming back to who matters to me, what matters to me, how can I keep being that kind of person, and bring a bit of definition to that. And it doesn't take perfect vision statements, doesn't take perfect set of values or what have you, but just the one question actually that I really love in terms of getting present is what if this is the last time? And that to me has been, I reckon, my fastest way of accessing the present moment out of everything I've ever done. What if this is the last time? What if this is the last webinar? What if this is the last, kissing my daughter goodnight. What if this is, and it completely changes how I engage in that moment. And it's just instant access for me, and just to keep practicing that regardless of what's going on. It's super challenging. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's absolutely a practice that can bring you back to the moment anyway.
Thanks, Toby. And Ryan, that is so powerful. Agree with what Thomas is saying there. We're coming up to time, so maybe one last question from me, and then final wrap up from both of you. When we started, we talked about, or we very briefly mentioned how you've both got so much in common, being entrepreneurs, coaches, fathers, as well as having been in elite sport. So, of the three, being an entrepreneur, being a dad, or playing elite sport, what would you say is the hardest and why?
Easy. Definitely dad for me.
Yeah, being a dad, for sure. Well, it's like try and play elite sport, but you didn't sleep last night, and your kid was vomiting at 2 a.m. and you had to clean them up. So it's the sort of the multiple dimensions that make it hard.
Yeah, and it's just, the thing. One of the things I often talk to clients about too is like, it's the things that we care most about that bring us the toughest emotion, right? Like, you don't really care about putting pegs on clothes on a clothesline because you just don't care. And this is sort of the Buddhism idea, I think, or at least my understanding of it anyway, of attachment. The more we care about something, then the more likely all this tough stuff is to show up. And so there's no doubt that I care about my children far more than I cared about. I thought I cared about going to the Olympics, and then I had children and realised, holy smokes, that was a blip on the radar compared to where I'm at now. So that sort of knowing in advance that's what you care about most is also going to bring you the full spectrum and the full intensity. That's one of the hardest things to sit with, I think.
Thanks, Toby. We've covered quite a lot of ground here. I'm going to have to watch back the recording to pick up on everything over again. So thank you so much. Any last thoughts from you, Ryan and Toby, before we sign off? In particular, if people want to reach out to you afterwards, how do they reach you? And any call outs to things you're working on at the moment?
I can start. Thanks everyone for joining. This is a really cool community, and I'm sure I could learn more from all of you than anything you could learn from what I say. It's a really great community, and I'll leave you with DadFit. It's if anyone's interested in being part of this in any way, I would love to hear from you, because we're at the stage of trying to build this up. I think could be really big change in the culture of fathering, and could have real benefits for all genders, not just dads. If we want to achieve gender equality at the workplace, then we have to achieve gender equality at home. And currently, in spite of all the progress in recent decades, we're still a long way from that point. And helping dads to connect with each other, find the way to emotionally express themselves with their kids, and get the priorities that truly matter to them in their lives is really exciting to me. So if anyone's interested, I'm at ryancarters.com or www.dadfit.au for the DadFit website, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. And always open to a coaching conversation or collaboration. If anyone wants to reach out, please do as well.
Awesome, Ryan. Yeah, I for one am definitely interested, mate. So I'll dig into it for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Great idea. I know a few other people who might be interested too. For me, look, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. One of the things I am really big on actually is sort of reflecting on death to appreciate life, right? And it sounds a bit morbid, and maybe that last time question is one of those things. But when you think about an hour and 10 or 20 people here tonight, it's nearly a whole day of time that's been invested here, and I'm super appreciative of that and aware of that. So thank you, everyone. to get in touch with me, my website is tobyaforalexanderjenkins.com. So that's tobyajenkins.com. Thanks, Paul, in the chat. Or find me on LinkedIn as well. And this idea of reinvention is one that I'm really exploring at the moment and excited by. So watch this space on that front. And thanks again, Paul, for having us. It's been really cool to have a chat and hear your thoughts too, Ryan. Thank you.
It's been our pleasure. It's been our pleasure. Thank you so much, Toby and Ryan. I'm so touched that you agreed to do this chat with us. So for everyone else, we have recorded this. We'll clean that recording up and write up a summary and share that as well. That will include links to Toby and Ryan's website, so you'll have that, and look forward to staying in touch and organizing many more of these. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time. Thanks everyone.
Bye.